Welcome to the Witchy Work Wishes podcast, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. Welcome back to Witchy Work Wishes. Last week in our episode, Death, the Veil, and What Comes Next, we sat together in some pretty big questions. Thank you again for staying with me for it. I know it's not an easy conversation to have. We talked about the different ways people understand what happens when we die. Reincarnation, returning again in a new form, moving into the spirit world maybe, or the ancestral plane. The more traditional ideas of heaven and hell. And we touched on the concept of the void, or, that returning to source energy. And also the atheistic perspective where consciousness simply comes to an end. We explored the idea of having multiple souls, the possibility of a journey or even a kind of, death after trial type scenario. And I shared one that I personally find interesting, which is the idea of resting or sleeping souls, where after death, the soul just simply rests. And then there's this other thread, absorption into nature, becoming part of the earth again, which in its own way mirrors that idea of returning to source. And somewhere in all of that, I think a lot of us land in this, in between space. Not one belief, but a blend. A little of this, a little of that, maybe a touch of reincarnation, a sense of ancestral presence, a feeling that our energy returns to something larger than ourselves. Really a both and way of looking at things instead of an either or. And of course, there are so many belief systems out there, so many religions, so many different spiritual paths. I know for a fact we did not cover all of them. We couldn't possibly. But for the ones we did touch on, there was something that kept waving its way through almost all of them. One quiet, consistent theme: that energy does not just disappear. It transforms, it shifts, it changes form, and moves into something new. And that, right there, is where I hope we can just pick things back up today. Today we are going to, start talking about what it means to actually work with death, not just as an idea, but as energy. But first, let's see, I've got some general housekeeping notes here at Witchy Work Wishes and some personal things going on in my world. I mentioned last week that I was heading down to my local zoo to spend some time with the mated pair of black swans. I really just wanted to sit with their energy and observe them, feel into that space so I could create something a little more personal for us over on Patreon with our April animal spirit work. And oh my gosh, it was such a good day. I was able to be there, just take my time, really connect with that energy. And the April worksheet is actually already up for you with the 3 journal prompts, the 3 exercises, and our witchy tea recipe. But guess what? Something unexpected happened while I was there. I was standing over by the flamingo area, just kind of, looking at them and admiring them. Those beautiful pink and white feathers, the ones. And there was a zookeeper nearby working in their space and answering questions from, people walking by. So, of course, I had to ask, right? I had to ask about the feathers and whether or not we are allowed to keep one if we find one. And guess what he said? He said yes. Now, he was very clear he would not give me one from inside their enclosure because there was a beautiful, huge, big pink flamingo feather on the ground. That wasn't going to happen. But he said that if there was a feather outside the space, like on the path, I could keep it. Now, that is not what I shared with you a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about feathers. So I wanted to come back and give you that update. I don't know if every zoo operates the same way, so this, might be one of those things where you just have to check locally. But at least at my zoo, the answer was yes. If I find a feather on the path, I can keep it. I just love that. I love it because it brings us back to that idea that we were talking about, that sometimes things actually are given. Not taken, not forced, just found when they're meant to be found. Let's see, Scotland also, it's becoming more and more real every single day. I know we're still, a little ways out, but my mom and I have started planning more details of the trip, and it's reaching that point where it's absolutely not an idea anymore. Like, it's happening. We are going. We will be in Scotland this fall, and it just feels super special to me, not only because of the history and the connection, the genealogical roots that tie our family back there, but also because I get this time with my mom. A real intentional mother-daughter trip. And that feels super special in its own kind of magic. I can't wait to share more details about this trip with you. But for now, we are planning some amazing things. And let's see, well, I am also really excited to report that my moon phase bantam hens are laying eggs again. And no, not just because the weather is warming up with spring, because they have all gotten out of their broody mode. And if you're wondering what does broody even mean, well, let me tell you. It's motherhood mode, like full on motherhood mode. Like, these are my eggs. I will sit here forever. Do not question me type energy. Now, being broody is when a hen decides she is ready to hatch babies, whether they are fertilized eggs or not. I have no roosters. There are no roosters in my family. So she basically sits on the nest, all puffed up, like super, super puffed up, very serious about her life choices, protecting those eggs like her entire purpose in life just clicked into place overnight. And the problem with that is when they're in that mode, that broody mode, they stop laying eggs. They're not interested in producing more eggs because, in their mind, they already have what they need. They are committed. They also, though, don't eat as much when they're in their broody mode, so they lose a bunch of weight. So I was a little nervous, when the first round of broodiness happened. I think I've already mentioned it here on the podcast, but there was a whole period here where my entire moon phase crew, except for one, was in broody mom mode. But we're coming out of it now. They are starting to shift back. The eggs are coming back in, and it just feels like everything is kind of returning to its normal, natural rhythm. Now, I did happen to get the most broody type of chicken breed, Silkies, so I can't act shocked about this process at all. But my goodness, when 4 of the 5 hens were all broody at the same time, it was just a bit to go through. Let's see, for today, I was sitting with our topic and really thinking about where we are right now, like this moment, this season, the energy of April. Because usually, for me at least, this time of year, it looks a very specific way. Normally, I start to feel a pull, a little whisper that turns into a nudge of some sorts, and then into something louder with the fae and fairies. That energy starts to come in almost like clockwork. It's predictable in like the best way. It's familiar, like an old friend showing up right on time in spring. And this year, I gotta say, like, there's not a lot happening. Maybe not nothing. There's a flicker, a tiny pull if I really sit and look for it, but it's not the same. Like, it's not that full body, can't ignore it kind of energy that I've come to expect this time of year. And I find that really interesting because I do tend to move in these cycles. There's a rhythm to the way different energies show up for me throughout the year. The runes, the Norse gods and goddesses that always start building as we move into summer. And I know why. Like, I know exactly why. It's tied to my time in the mountains. That space I return to every year, my home away from home. When I'm there, I feel completely wrapped in that Norse type energy. It's strong, it's grounded, it's ancient in a way that just settles into my bones, and I love it. And then really it rises again later in the year, around November and December, right as we move into Yule and, the deepening of winter. So there's a pattern there, a rhythm I've come to trust, which is why I had to pause for a minute and ask myself, like, where are the fairies this year? What shifted? Because if I go back, or even if you go back and look at past episodes, you'll see it. There are entire stretches of time where I am deep in that Fey energy right before Beltane. It shows up pretty consistently. So why am I not feeling it the same this year? I don't know. It's just not the same way. It's not the same feeling. Why are we talking about death and the veil and what comes next? And now today, death energy instead. Well, the truth is, I don't have an answer. I don't. I really Just don't have some perfectly packaged answer for that. I wish I could tie it up neatly and say, this is why, but that's just not how it works for me. The honest answer is the topics I'm pulled into, the ones I sit with, the ones I bring here to share with you, they are not random. They're the things that are right in front of me, the things moving through my life in real time, the energy that's asking for my attention, whether I expected it or not. And sometimes that means, I guess, the rhythms shift. Sometimes the season doesn't always look the way it has in previous years. And instead of fairies and light, playful energy, leading the way into spring, this year, I guess we're going deeper. But you know what? Next week is kind of about Beltane. I wanted to talk about some wards and some protection first before we do our big Wheel of the Year celebration. And I will be talking about the Fae and Fairies a little bit then. I don't know. Still, it's just not the same. Right now is quieter for me. Something is just asking us to sit a little closer to the veil and just really listen. So we will. Today is all about working with death energy. And while I know I touched on it briefly last week, today we're going to just dive all the way in because there are so many ways to incorporate this into our practices, both for our personal lives and our corporate worlds. So today, I would love to invite you to sit with me for just a little bit. I've got you covered for the next hour because working with death energy does not have to feel dark or overwhelming. It can be grounding and honest, even deeply supportive in ways we don't always expect. So, wherever you are right now, settle in a little and just let the outside world quiet down. Come sit with me as we explore the many ways we can work with the energy of death, not only as an ending, but as a transformation, a threshold, and a powerful, powerful part of the cycle we are already living inside every single day. What do people actually mean when they say death energy? I'd like to start here because I think for a lot of us, the word death immediately takes us to one very specific place, like physical death, loss, grief, end of life. And yes, while that is absolutely part of it, that is not the only way this energy shows up. Death energy, in a witchcraft sense, is the energy of endings. It's the moment something completes, closes, or falls away. It's the last page of a chapter, the exhale at the end of a long breath, the space where something that once was simply isn't anymore. And we move through this energy all of the time. Every time we outgrow a version of ourselves, every time we let go of a habit, a belief, a relationship, a role, even, every time something in our life no longer fits and we finally allow it to end, yeah, that's death energy. It's not super dramatic or loud all of the time. A lot of the time, I'm finding it's actually pretty quiet. It can feel like a slow drifting away, maybe like a soft unraveling, some type of knowing that something has run its course, even if we can't quite explain why. We've all had that one, haven't we? Like there are times we just know. But death energy is not just about the ending itself. I mean, obviously, that is part of it. It has to be part of the process. It's also about what happens after the ending. Because when something falls away, it doesn't just disappear into nothing. It changes form, it breaks down, it releases, it becomes something else. Just like in nature, nothing is wasted. Leaves fall, they decay, they return to the soil, and from that soil, something new eventually grows. That in between space, that quiet, sometimes uncomfortable pause between what was and what will be, well, I think that's death energy too. It's the liminal space, the threshold, the place where we don't quite know what's next, but we can't go back either. And if you've ever been in a season of your life where things, felt uncertain, where something ended, but the next thing hadn't arrived yet, then you've already been there too. You've already worked with this energy, whether you realized it or not. You might not have named it as such, but you worked through it. And the more we begin to recognize it, I think the less we fear it. It just stops being something that happens to us and starts becoming something we can move with, something we can honor, and even something we can work with intentionally in our practice. When I say that I feel like I'm naturally sitting in this conversation right now, I really, really mean it. This isn't just a topic I pulled out of nowhere. This is something I've been living inside of for a bit now. Last year, 2025, held a bunch of endings for me and a lot of different ones, a really different kind of deaths for each one. They each landed differently with me and each left its own mark. The year began with the passing of my aunt. She wasn't a blood aunt, she was my uncle's wife, but still very much family. And when someone like that goes, you feel the ripple of it, the shift in the family, the quiet space they leave behind. And then spring came, and with it, a new batch of kittens that I was fostering. You guys know this is something I've done for years in one way or another. It's been a part of my life for a long, long time. And this batch was a little itty bitty batch. They were tiny, just days old, which meant, feeding them every 2 hours, around the clock, through the night. And, pretty quickly I realized they were sick, which honestly is not super unusual with feral kittens. But knowing that doesn't make it any easier when you're in it. Within those first few weeks, I lost one. And then I lost another. The four that remained, gosh, they fought, they grew stronger, they made it through, and eventually went on to their forever homes. But I did not walk away from that untouched. There was a heaviness there, kind of emptiness that settles in after something like that. Quite kind of heartbreak that lingers a lot longer than you expect it to. And then it came closer to home for me. One of my own cats became sick, actually from the exact same thing. The feral kittens brought it into my home. And she fought, like she really did. But in the end, I had to make that decision that so many of us dread. The one where love means letting go and ending their suffering. At the same time, my almost 12-year-old German Shepherd started telling me in his own way that it was his time too. So on the same day, the very same day, I took them both in. And in this candlelit room at the vet, I said goodbye to my cat. And then I said goodbye to my dog. And just when it felt like maybe I could catch my breath, June came. And my father, who had been struggling with Alzheimer's, passed. My brother and I spent those last few days with him in the hospital, sitting with him, talking to him, being there as he made the transition. And in a way, we were able to find some peace in that time. But still, it was another ending. And then this year, almost exactly 1 year after my aunt passed, his wife, my uncle followed. And so here I am, sitting with you, talking about death energy today. Not from a distance, but from right inside of it, from a place of having moved through many, many endings in many, many different forms over a relatively short period of time. And I think that's why this conversation feels so present for me right now. Because when you've walked through that many goodbyes, I don't know, you just start to understand this energy a little differently. Not just as something that happens, but as something that changes you, shapes you, and just asks you to learn how to move with it. One of the most accessible and probably one of the most supportive ways we can begin working with death energy is through release. And hopefully I can keep this simple because I don't think it has to be super complicated in an overly, like ritualistic way to be powerful. At its core, death energy asks us to let go, to notice what is no longer aligned, what feels heavy maybe, what feels complete, or what has, in fact, actually ended, and allow it to end. And I know that sounds simple when we say it like that. But if we're being honest, this is where a lot of us get stuck. Because even when something isn't working anymore, even when we know we've outgrown it, like we know, there's still a part of us that wants to hold on. I think it's natural. We do it out of habit, out of comfort, sometimes even out of fear of what comes next. So, working with death energy as release is really about creating space to consciously let something go. And that can look really different depending on where you are in your life. It might be releasing a thought pattern that keeps, looping and looping and looping in your mind. A story you've been telling yourself about who you are. It might be letting go of a habit that no longer supports you, or an expectation you've been carrying that just feels heavy now. And sometimes it's bigger than that. Sometimes it's releasing a version of yourself, the person you were 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, the roles you've played, the identities you've held on to, even when you've quietly outgrown them. And sometimes it's learning how to let go of someone you've loved who is no longer here in the same way. And really letting go of them, right? We're not erasing them or forgetting them or, pretending they didn't matter. What we're learning to release is the way we are or were holding on to them in the physical world. The conversations we can't have anymore, the routines, the presence, the, version of life that included them in that specific way. And that's not something that happens all at once. There's no way. It's a process. Working with death energy is a process. It comes in waves, in moments, in, small little realizations that something has shifted. And working with death energy here today is about allowing that shift to happen without forcing it, without, rushing it, or without judging it how long it should or should not take. It's about slowly, gently letting the relationship change form. Because love doesn't end, but the way we hold that love, yeah, it might. Or, it does. It just does. And that in its own way is part of the release, too. Where death energy becomes really supportive is that it reminds us that letting go is not failure. It's just part of the cycle. It is a necessary step in making space for something new. And we can work with this in a really simple, grounded way. Again, you don't need anything elaborate, right? You can just sit down and write out what you're ready to release. Just let it come onto the page without overthinking it, and then do something physical with it. Tear it up, burn it, throw it away, something. Do something and let your body be part of the process of letting go. You could even, do this in the shower. Like just let the water run over you and imagine whatever you're holding on to is just washing away. That can be a very intentional moment of saying, I'm ready to let this end. And then trusting that in doing so, you are already stepping into the next phase, even if you can't fully see it yet. So I just actually had a glimpse of this the other day. The cat I mentioned, the one we lost in May, she used to curl up at the back of one of my couches, tucked right up against the curtains. And even now, a year later, I can still see some of her fur in them. It's like a little imprint of her is still actually there. I've noticed it the whole time. For the past 11 months, I've seen it every single day, but I haven't touched it. Purposely, I have not washed the curtains because somewhere in me, I don't know, it felt like if I left it just as is, a part of her was still there. She was still with me. And the other day, I was standing there looking at those curtains again, and I don't know, something shifted. And I had this thought, like, okay, it's time. I'm ready. And for the first time, it felt okay to wash them. Sorry. Not because she's gone, but because I don't need that physical imprint to hold on to, her anymore. She is already with me, just in a different way. And at that small moment, that, simple act of washing those curtains, well, that's what working with death energy can look like. It did for me. Not in a big ritualistic way. I just had some quiet recognition that something had changed and a gentle willingness to let it. Same thing happened with my dog. There are parts of him still in my home and yard with bowls and things and fur that I have not been able to let go of. But here we are. It's spring. All of a sudden, it just feels okay. Like now is the time. That's been a little different with my dad. My brother and I actually did a really big ritual for my father up in the mountains last year. My two boys got to be a part of it, as well as my nephews. So I don't know, I just don't have the same lingering, drawn out emotions with his passing. I really took the time and space to do a little more work with it. But for some reason, I don't know, guys. Now is the time with the loss of my two furry family members. I am ready. Once we've allowed that ending to happen, there is this space that just naturally opens up. And if you've ever been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's that in between place where the old thing is gone, but the new thing hasn't quite arrived yet. And this, like right here, is where a lot of death energy really lives, not just in the ending, but in the space of becoming. And I think this is the part that can feel the most uncomfortable for a lot of us because we like clarity, don't we? We like knowing what's next. We like having something solid to hold on to. But this space, it's a little tough. It just doesn't offer that. It asks us to pause and sit in the unknown, to trust that something is shifting, even if we can't see it. And I think this is also where a lot of us just try to rush. Like we try to fill the space, right? We try to replace what we just lost as quickly as possible and try to move forward before we've actually allowed ourselves to just be here. But this in between space, this is where the transformation is actually happening. It's a little invisible, really. The kind of work that doesn't always feel productive, but is deeply, deeply necessary. It's like winter, really, right? When everything looks still on the surface, but underneath things are resting. Or here we are in spring, right? We can use seeds as our metaphor. It's like a seed in the soil before it ever breaks through the ground. And if we can learn to sit here, even if it's just a little longer than, feels comfortable, we start to realize something pretty important. We're not stuck. We are changing. And working with death energy in this way, it's about allowing ourselves just to be in that space without needing to rush out of it. This is not always easy, but there are ways to start. First option is just sitting in the in between. This is the hardest one. Might as well start with the hardest one, right? But honestly, I think it's probably the most important one. Working with transformation energy sometimes means doing less. Instead of rushing to figure everything out, instead of forcing the next step, you consciously choose to stay in the unknown for a moment. This can look like not immediately replacing something you just lost, not rushing into a new decision, and giving yourself space before whatever is next. Even saying something as simple as, I don't know. I don't know yet, and that's okay. This is you honoring transformation while it's happening, not just after it's done. Second option is doing a little rewriting of identity, like who am I becoming now? Transformation energy asks us to update how we see ourselves. So instead of only focusing on what ended, we can begin to explore what is emerging. This can look like journaling. You could journal something like, if that version of me is done, who am I now? It can look like noticing new desires and interests, or maybe new boundaries. It can look like speaking differently about yourself. That's huge energy work. Example, instead of I used to be someone who, fill in the blank, you shift into I'm becoming somebody who, whatever it is. You're not forcing the new identity, you are meeting it halfway. Another way to start is creating a small bridge action. This is where transformation becomes a little more tangible, really. Like we are looking for just one small step that connects the old version to the new one. Think of it like a bridge between two versions of your life. This can look like changing one routine that no longer fits, setting one new boundary, or starting something small that aligns with where you're going. The key here is one step. Don't grab a bunch of them. Transformation energy isn't about doing everything all at once. I think it's more about honoring the shift with one aligned action. Now, see, last week we talked a little about the veil, the space between the physical and the non physical, between what we can see and what we can feel. And when we talk about working with death energy, this is one of the ways it can show up in a connected, almost subtle way, though. And there are really simple ways to step into this if it feels right for you. Now, I completely understand. Not everyone will feel called to this, and that is completely okay. You don't have to work with the veil to work with death energy. You don't have to connect with ancestors or spirits in this way for your practice to be valid. For some of us, this space will feel very natural, very comforting. And for others, it may not resonate at all. And both of those experiences are equally okay. This is simply one doorway, one way of engaging with this energy if it feels aligned for you. There are three pretty common ways most of us naturally start to work with the veil, I think. Through connection, listening, and through honoring those, in between spaces in our own lives. For connection work, with your ancestors, loved ones, and spirits, it's probably the most well-known way. Working with a veil as a place of connection can look like speaking to ancestors or loved ones who have passed, setting up a small photo or memory, space, and offering a candle, food, or, just a moment of acknowledgement. The process is less about, like summoning anything and more about remembering and honoring and opening a line of connection. Super gentle and very respectful. And the next one is listening, really. It's just intuition and subtle awareness. This one is honestly a little more personal, I think. Instead of reaching out, you are creating space to receive. Now, this can look like, sitting in stillness or meditation, paying attention to dreams, noticing subtle feelings and nudges or intuitive hits. This usually happens when the veil is thinner or when we intentionally step closer, to it. Like our awareness is just heightened. There are moments in the year where this energy feels stronger, more accessible, maybe. Someone is one of those times. If you've ever heard of a dumb supper or even participated in one, that's actually a really beautiful example of working with the veil. It is connection, it's listening, and it's stepping into that threshold space all at the same time. Dumb suppers live in connection and are one of the most intentional ways of connecting with ancestors, loved ones who have passed, and spirit presence. Well, you're not just thinking about them, you are inviting them to the table. And there's a level of respect and presence that goes beyond a quick candle or passing thought. And it also involves a lot of listening because part of a dumb supper is done in silence. You are creating space to feel and notice and just be aware of subtle shifts. It's not about expecting something dramatic to happen. It's about being open to whatever happens, whatever quiet presence may come through. Also, a dumb supper sits inside threshold work because if you do it at Beltane or Samhain, those two celebrations are considered a time when the veil is thinnest and the boundary between worlds softens. So the dumb supper becomes a ritual held at the threshold. You are intentionally stepping into that in between space, not just acknowledging it, but participating in it. Okay, let's see. Third is threshold work. Transitions and liminal spaces. I think this is the one people don't always realize, but it's definitely deeply tied to the veil. Working with the veil as a threshold, meaning using moments of transition as magical space. This can look like working during dusk or dawn, those in between times, honoring new moon, dark moon phases, or, marking life transitions, endings, beginnings, big, big shifts. The veil isn't just about spirit, it's about in between energy. So, really, I think anytime you are in a moment where one thing is ending and another hasn't fully begun, you're standing at a threshold. And that is a type of veil work, too. Once you start noticing the veil, you really can't unnotice it. You start to feel those in between moments more clearly, the shifts, the quiet changes, the endings happening underneath the surface. And at some point, naturally, the question becomes okay, now what do I do with this? How do I actually work with this energy in my practice instead of just, experiencing it as it passes through? And that's where we start stepping into working with death energy in a more intentional way. And there are actually really simple, grounded, approachable ways to begin working with this energy in your everyday practice. So let's talk about what that can actually look like. Release rituals is a good one, letting something end on purpose. This is the most direct way to work with death energy. Instead of waiting for something to fall apart, we choose to close it. Writing something down and burning it, tearing it up, burying it, even washing it away in water, becomes a physical act of saying, this is complete. Working with the dark moon is a good option. The dark moon is pure death energy, not the new moon, but that last sliver before it, that still, empty in between space. This is where we rest, reflect, release, and not begin anything new. You can create a simple practice here, even just sitting in the dark with a candle and asking, what is ready to end? Ancestral connection is a great way to work with death energy. Death energy naturally connects us to those who came before us. This doesn't have to be big or formal. It can look like saying someone's name out loud, lighting a candle for them, or placing a photo somewhere meaningful. Again, this is less about summoning anything. It's just more about remembering and honoring. Another good option is liminal space awareness, threshold work. Death energy lives in the in-between. So when we start noticing and working with dawn and dusk and doorways and thresholds, life transitions and endings that, haven't fully become beginnings yet, really even pausing for a moment in a doorway and just taking a breath can become a small act of honoring that space. Seasonal alignment's a great option, working with the wheel of the year. I think certain times of the year just naturally carry stronger death energy, especially Samhain, honoring the dead, thinning veil in late fall and winter, decay, rest, composting. Working with these seasons instead of resisting them helps us align with the natural cycle of endings and renewal. Shadow work is another great option. Death energy just asks us to face what we usually avoid. This is where shadow work comes in to, help us. We can gently sit with old wounds, patterns we're ready to outgrow, and truths we've been avoiding. Not to fix everything overnight, but to allow parts of ourselves to complete and transform. Another good way to work with death energy is a physical clearing. This is such an underrated form of death work. Letting go of physical items, I'm speaking to myself, that no longer align is literal release energy. This can look like clearing out a closet, letting go of objects tied to old versions of you, and, reorganizing your space with intention. Maybe it's washing some curtains and saying goodbye. You are saying, this version of my life is no longer here. Another good option is grief honoring. Instead of pushing grief away, we just create space for it. That might look like setting aside some time to feel, journaling memories, or creating a small altar or remembrance space. Grief is a very, very personal journey. It's not something to get over, it's something to move with. And in doing that, we honor the depth of what was. The last option I have is just a very conscious ending. And this is a big one, especially for any of us as a business witch. When we start ending things well, it changes the game. That can look like closing a project with intention, ending a relationship with honesty and care, or acknowledging when something has run its course. Instead of dragging things out, we allow them to complete with awareness. And if we zoom out for a second, all of those options and practices are really just asking us to do one thing: to trust that endings are not empty. They are active and necessary and a part of the magic. And the more we work with death energy, the more we realize that we are not losing things. We are transforming with them. All right, speaking of business witches, let's bring this into our everyday world for a minute and put on our corporate business hats. Because if you are anything like me, you are not just working with this energy in your spiritual practice. You are living it out in your work, your business, your office, and your day to day life. And this is where being a business witch really comes alive. Because death energy shows up here all of the time. It shows up in the projects that no longer feel aligned, the systems that used to work but don't anymore, the clients, roles, or responsibilities that you've outgrown, even if they once felt like the perfect fit. This is a tough area. I think this is where we resist it the most because in the business world, we are taught to hold on, to push through, to, make things work, even when they are clearly trying to end. But death energy does not work like that. When something is complete, it will start to feel heavy. It will start to feel forced and really start to take on more energy than it gives. And that's not failure. That's a signal. It's a sign. It's a sign that the energy of something is asking to close. And working with death energy in this space means learning to recognize those signals and signs and respond to them with intention. It might look like ending a project that no longer feels aligned, even if you've invested a bunch of time and energy into it. It might mean letting go of a client or a role that you've outgrown, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. It might be restructuring the way you do things, changing systems, setting new boundaries, or I don't know, finally releasing patterns of burnout that you've been carrying for far, far too long. When we resist these endings, we stay stuck in something that's already trying to complete. It is trying to wrap things up, but we are holding it back. But when we work with death energy, we create space space for new ideas, new opportunities, new ways of working that actually support who we are now, like right now. And that doesn't mean we make impulsive decisions or, we're not burning everything down overnight. This is intentional. This is noticing, hey, this no longer fits. It has run its course, and this version of my work is ready to end. And not just that, not just noticing and recognizing it, but then taking one aligned step to honor it. Because as a business witch, you are not just building something, you are constantly evolving it. And that means, naturally, you are also constantly being asked to let parts of it go. Not because you failed, but because you are growing. And death energy, when we allow it to move through our work, becomes a very powerful tool. Not for ending things, ruthlessly, but for ending them wisely, so that what comes next has room to actually take root. I know I've mentioned the 9-year cycle in numerology and how 2025 really marked the closing of a chapter, with this year opening the door to a brand new cycle. And I've been feeling that, not just in theory, but in a very real, very personal way. I shared a photo over on Patreon back in March of me at the zoo feeding a giraffe while I was working directly with our giraffe spirit energy in the worksheets we moved through together. And at that moment, that experience wasn't just symbolic. It was part of something much bigger that I've been sitting with. I've been spending a lot of time really looking ahead, asking myself, what do I want the next 9 years to look like? Not just in my personal life, but in my companies, in the work I'm building, in, the way I show up every single day. And when you start asking, those kind of questions, you very quickly realize something. Not everything can come with you. There are systems, patterns, people, ways of doing things, even roles I've held that have been good, that have served their purpose, but are not meant for where I'm going next. And that's where death energy comes in again. Not as something heavy. Well, I don't know. Yes, it can feel that way. It can definitely feel heavy, but really more as something that is necessary. Because if I want the next chapter to be stronger and more aligned and more intentional than ever, then I have to be willing to let certain things end. to close what no longer fits, to release what I've outgrown, and to make space for what's trying to be built. And weaving this energy into my corporate world, into my day to day business, it's just not optional. It just isn't. It's part of the work. Growth does not, only come from adding more. Sometimes it comes from having the courage to let something go. So, how do we do it? How do we do this as business witches? I've got three options. First one is just closing out what is complete, some intentional ending work. One of the simplest ways to work with death energy at the office is to actually close things properly. Not dragging projects on, not keeping things open just because they've always been open, they've always been there, but recognizing when something is in fact done. This can look like finishing a project and taking a moment to acknowledge it before, moving on. It can look like cleaning out old files, emails, or systems that are no longer needed. It can look like consciously saying, "This chapter of my work is complete." You can do this quietly at your desk. Just take a breath, close the file, and mentally mark it as finished. That small act, that is death energy in motion. Second one I have is some releasing energy that just doesn't belong to you. Offices are full of energy, stress, pressure, other people's emotions, expectations. And you know what? We carry way more of it than we realize. Working with death energy here means letting, that energy end with you instead of carrying it home. This can look like washing your hands at the end of the day, very intentionally, like letting it go. It can look like visualizing everything that isn't yours dropping off before you leave. It can also look like taking 30 seconds at your desk to say, "This is not mine to carry." You are allowing that energetic attachment to die off instead of continuing. And third, I've got ending some patterns that lead to burnout. And this one is super powerful and honestly a little confronting, isn't it? Sometimes what needs to end is not a project or a person, it's a pattern. Overworking, overcommitting, saying yes when you mean no. Death energy can be used to interrupt those cycles. It can look like setting one clear boundary and, of course, sticking to it. It can look like not answering that one after hours email. It can look like choosing to pause instead of pushing through exhaustion. It's not about changing everything, it's about choosing one place where the old pattern ends. There's another place this shows up in our work. And it's one I don't think we always like to sit with, but it matters. Sometimes death energy moves through our work relationships with an employee, with a boss, with someone we've worked alongside for years. And there comes a moment where something shifts. Maybe the role no longer fits. Maybe the dynamic has changed. I don't know, maybe one person has grown in a different direction than the other. And you can feel it, that quiet knowing that something is coming to an end. And just like everything else we've talked about today, this is a form of death energy too, just a relationship in its current form, reaching completion. And this is where we have a choice. We can avoid it, we can delay it, we can hold on to something that's already trying to close, or we can meet it with intention and say goodbye in a way that is honest and respectful and aligned. Because saying goodbye in a work setting doesn't have to be cold. It doesn't have to be abrupt or disconnected. I mean, I get it if people are parting on bad terms, but what if things are good and you genuinely like the person and want the best for them? Well, it can look like having a clear, honest conversation, acknowledging the time and effort and energy that was shared, and expressing appreciation, even if things didn't end perfectly. It's recognizing that something mattered, even if it's no longer meant to continue. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is just allow the relationship to end well, without resentment, without dragging it out longer than it needs to be, or, turning it into something that it was never meant to become. When we handle these corporate endings with care, we don't just close a chapter, we honor it. And I think that is what working with death energy can look like in this space. Not cutting things off harshly, but just allowing them to complete with clarity, with respect, and with just enough softness to say, hey, this mattered, and now it's time to let it go. I have a quick, simple death energy practice you can use right now. A way to actually work with this energy in your own space, in your own time. Just a small intentional practice that you can do really wherever you are, at home, at your desk, even just sitting quietly for a few minutes. Start by asking yourself one question. What am I ready to let go of? And try not to overthink it if you can. Just notice what comes up. More than likely, something will naturally come up. It might be a thought, a habit, a situation, a version of yourself, or even just a feeling you've been carrying for a little too long. And then once you have it, I want you to write it down. Let it exist outside of you for a moment. And then choose one small way to release it. Again, we talked about tearing it up. You can also throw it away. We've talked about burning it. Do something that feels aligned. We are looking for an acknowledgement that this has run its course. And as you release it, say, I am letting this go. We are going to release what we no longer need to carry. Also, though, notice where this energy might already be moving in your life. Because this isn't something separate from you. It's not something you have to go out and find or create. It's already there. I promise it is. You'll find it in the quiet moments when, something doesn't feel the same anymore. In the places where you've been holding on just a little longer than you need to. You'll find it in the little nudges that say, hey, this is complete. And the more we allow ourselves to recognize those moments, the more we start to understand that death energy is not something to fear. It's something to work with. It is something that walks with us through every ending, every transition, every shift into something new. And you know what? When we meet it with awareness and softness, with intention, we stop resisting the natural rhythm of everything, of life, and we start moving with it. Okay, before you move on with your day, if you have your journal or even just a few minutes to think and want a little bit more to work with, I have some questions that I'm personally working with, so you can too. Since this is obviously something that is front and center with me, I have these journal prompts ready to go. First one is, what in my life feels complete, even if I haven't fully let it go yet? Second one, what am I holding on to that feels heavier than it used to? Third one, what would it feel like to gently release it? And the fourth one, what part of me is ready to change or evolve right now? And remember, you don't have to have all the answers. I'm certainly not looking for everything to be solved and worked out by answering these questions. This isn't about figuring everything out. For me, it is just about noticing and being honest about what is ready to shift. If there is one thing I hope you can take with you today, it's that death energy is not something separate from your life. It's really woven into it. And I'm sorry, I feel like I've done a lot of rambling and a lot of repeating on this one. I'll be honest, this is like my third time trying to record it because I was crying every single time. So hopefully this is going to, well, it is. This is it. I'm recording this one. I'm not going backwards. Um, Death energy is in every ending, every shift, every little moment where something, I don't know, something no longer feels the way it used to. The more we allow ourselves to see it, name it, and work with it, I think the less it feels like something that's happening to us, and the more it becomes something we can move with. Because this energy, I don't think it's here to take anything from us. It's here to help us release what we've outgrown, to clear space for what's trying to come through, and to gently guide us from one version of our lives into the next. I know that's not easy. It does not feel easy. Sometimes it feels uncertain. It hurts. It's definitely sad. Sometimes it just feels uncomfortable. And sometimes it feels like standing in a space where nothing is quite clear yet. But that space, that in between space, that's not emptiness. That's transformation. So wherever you are right now, whether you're holding on, letting go, or standing somewhere in the middle of both, just know you're not lost. You're in the process like I am. And that process is part of the magic too. I really, really appreciate you being here today for this episode. I know talking about death energy is not always easy, and I don't feel like I did a really good job of it today. But please know I am very thankful you shared this space with me. Okay, I do have a poem and the moon update for this week. If you can stay with me a little bit longer, I'm going to go grab those notes and I'll be right back. Let's start with the poem, and it goes. When something shifts and says goodbye, it doesn't end, changes why. A closing door, a quiet turn, a fading flame that used to burn. We feel it first as something gone, a space where something once lived on, a chair now still, a voice now air, a missing piece that's everywhere. But death is not a harsh divide, it's just a crossing, side to side, a step between what was and will, a sacred pause, a quiet still. Like autumn leaves that fall away, they do not mourn the end of day. They drift, they rest, they break, they feed, becoming soil for what we need. And we stand in that in between, where what was known is no longer seen. We reach behind, we search ahead, we walk with love and call it dead. But nothing loved is ever lost. It only shifts at some soft cost. A voice becomes a memory, a touch becomes subtle energy. So when it's time to let things go, we don't release, we let them flow. From hand to heart, from form to space, from something seen to felt in place. Goodbyes are not the end of you, they're doorways, opening something new. A gentle undoing, a sacred art, a breaking open of the heart. And in that break, that tender seam, we find the edge of what can be, where endings whisper soft and true, I've made this space, now grow into you. Well, the moon this week is a dark moon as this airs on Wednesday, April 15th. And no, I did not plan this episode to be so perfectly aligned with it. We have our last exhale happening right now. That quiet, empty, almost still point in the cycle where the sky goes dark and the light disappears for just a moment. And with everything we've been talking about today, this is death energy in one of its purest forms. The dark moon isn't asking you to begin anything. It's not asking you to set intentions or make plans or, figure out what's next. The dark moon is asking you to pause, rest, and step back, to let something end. This is the part of the cycle where things naturally fall away, where energy pulls inward instead of outward, and where clarity doesn't always come from doing. It comes from not doing. I know some of us love this space, but it is also where a lot of us get a little uncomfortable because we're so used to filling space, aren't we? We want to plan the next step, fix what feels uncertain, move forward before we've actually allowed ourselves to be here, right now. But the dark holds us in that in-between space. The same space we've been talking about all episode. That threshold, that moment where something has actually already ended, but the next thing hasn't actually quite begun. So if you're feeling a little slower right now, maybe a little more, reflective this week, maybe even a little emotional or quiet, yeah, you're not off. You are aligned with the moon and her cycles. This is a beautiful time to work with release in the simplest ways. Just sit in a room, sit in a quiet room, light a candle, and ask yourself, what am I ready to let go of? And then work with whatever comes up. You don't have to solve it. You don't have to fix it. You can simply acknowledge it. Allow it to soften, kind of loosen up, to begin its process of ending. Even something as simple as taking a shower and imagining everything you've been holding on to just washing off can be a great way to work with this dark moon energy. The dark moon is not empty. It is full of transformation. It is a beautiful space where everything resets, where everything turns to stillness right before it begins again. So let it happen. Let yourself be here right now this week. Let yourself slow down. Let yourself not have all the answers for just a little while because this space, this dark, quiet in between space, this is where the magic begins again. And we need this time. We need this rest, this slower, quieter energy, because it's not just about ending. It's about preparing. It's about resetting for what's coming next. And in just a couple of weeks, we are going to step into Beltane. This is a big one. This is one of those celebrations on the wheel of the year where everything shifts. The energy rises, things start to bloom, life starts moving outward again in a really vibrant, active way. And I don't know about you, but I want us to be ready for that. I want us to feel that shift and, celebrate it. Celebrate it like never before. So originally, I was planning to jump straight into our big Beltane episode next week, but the more I've been sitting with this and thinking about it, the more it feels like we need one more step in between. Something to bridge this quiet, inward death energy into that brighter, more active Beltane energy. We happen to also have a full moon on Beltane's Friday, May 1st celebration. So, oh my gosh, you guys, there's a bunch of energy coming up. So rest right now, just rest, rest, rest. Next week, we are going to spend a little time talking about the Fae and Fairies, that energy that becomes really active this time of year. And we're also going to talk about Beltane wards, ways to protect our space, our homes, our energy in general, as things start to open up and expand again. So we are going to rest right now, then we're going to prepare, and then the following week, right before May 1st, we are going to step fully into our Beltane celebration together. Sound good? Well, enjoy the dark moon this week and the beautiful new moon happening on Friday. Enjoy that fresh energy for the weekend. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I will talk with you next week.
Thank you for joining me today at Witchy Work Wishes, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. For more information and additional content, please visit me online at witchyworkwishes.com. If you want to send me a personal note, please email me at info@witchyworkwishes.com. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Witchy Work Wishes.